The storm rolled over Atlanta like a dark, growling beast, swallowing the late afternoon sun and casting shadows over the sprawling glass mansion on Crestwood Hill. Inside that mansion, behind the polished floors and gleaming marble counters, a story was about to unfold, one that would break open a man's heart in ways money never could. When the garage door slid open earlier than expected, no one in the house knew that the millionaire who lived there, Adrian Cole, had returned home ahead of schedule. And when he stepped inside, completely soaked from the unexpected downpour, he froze in place, not because of the storm, but because of what he saw his maid doing in the center of his grand foyer. The sight stopped his breath. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps stories like these reach more hearts. Adrian Cole had built his wealth with the iron grip of a man who understood loss too well. After losing his parents at a young age, he had poured every ounce of energy into becoming untouchable, financially, emotionally, socially. His mansion was immaculate, his cars pristine, his life controlled. But beneath all the glitter, he carried a quiet loneliness that even his millions could not soften. The only warmth in the house came from the few people who worked there, especially the maid, a quiet woman named Nora, hired just 6 months earlier. She was gentle and polite, always speaking softly, always finishing her tasks before anyone even realized she had started them. She kept her past to herself, and Adrian never asked. He liked things simple. But that afternoon, simplicity shattered. When Adrian walked into the foyer, he found Nora kneeling on the floor, but she was not cleaning. She was holding a little boy no older than 5, his face buried in her shoulder, his tiny arms wrapped tightly around her neck. His clothing was worn, his shoes frayed, and his small frame trembled as though he had been crying for a very long time. Scattered around them were a few bags, the kind people carry when they have nowhere else to go. For a moment, Adrian simply stared, trying to make sense of why a child was in his home, why his maid was clutching him like that, and why both of them looked like the world had crushed them. Nora's face was streaked with tears, but her expression held a fierce, protective strength that Adrian had never seen in her before. She didn't notice him, not at first. She was whispering something to the child, rocking him gently in a rhythm that seemed practiced, familiar. When she finally looked up, her breath hitched. In that instant, Adrian saw everything she had been trying to hide. The boy was hers. And she had no home. As the storm hammered against the windows, Adrian felt something inside him shift, though he didn't quite understand it yet. For most of his life, he had told himself that people made their own choices, that success or failure was simply a reflection of effort. It was easier that way. Cleaner. But the sight before him was messy, painfully human, and impossible to ignore. He quietly stepped back, leaning against the wall, watching as Nora tried to gather herself, wiping her face and smoothing the boy's hair. Her hands were shaking. She had always been so grateful, always so eager to work, always leaving before the sun set. Adrian had assumed she went home to a family, or at least to a peaceful life. Now he realized the truth might be something far different, and far more tragic. The rain intensified, lightning flashing briefly through the glass walls like a strobe of truth. Adrian remained silent for several long minutes, just observing. He watched Nora gather the child in her arms and stand, balancing him against her hip with the natural ease of a mother who had done this 1,000 times. But when she turned toward the door, prepared to leave, maybe even expecting to be fired, something inside Adrian broke open. He didn't stop her with words, not yet. Instead, he simply walked into the living room and sat down heavily, letting the enormity of the moment settle on him. He needed time to understand what he had seen, time to breathe through the raw ache rising in his chest. It had been years since he'd let himself feel anything deeply, and the sensation was almost overwhelming. Nora paused. She could sense his presence now, his heavy footsteps, the quiet tension in the air. Slowly, hesitantly, she followed him into the room. She didn't try to explain. She didn't defend herself. She simply stood there with the child pressed against her, nodding as though accepting her fate. The room felt unbearably still. Adrian stared at her, not with anger, but with a strange mix of confusion and concern. In the dim glow of the stormy windows, he saw her exhaustion, the kind that runs deeper than sleepless nights. He saw the boy's thin arms, the hollow look in his eyes, the way he clung to his mother with desperate trust. Something was terribly wrong. That realization tightened his chest like a vice. The housekeeper had mentioned once, offhandedly, that Nora sometimes arrived early because she didn't like to be outside alone in the morning. He had brushed it off. He remembered the stiffness in Nora's shoulders when someone knocked at the front door too loudly. The way she jumped at unexpected sounds. The careful way she avoided leaving at night. He hadn't understood it. But now, watching her stand there trembling, it all clicked painfully into place. She wasn't hiding a child from him. She was running from someone, or something. Thunder cracked outside, the rumble echoing in the nearly empty living room. The boy flinched, burying his face in her neck. And that tiny gesture, with all its innocence and fear, hit Adrian like a punch to the gut. He suddenly saw his younger self in that child. Afraid. Alone. Unprotected. And in that moment, Adrian Cole, powerful, wealthy, respected, felt utterly humbled. He finally found his voice, though it was soft, nearly shaky. He spoke only a few words, and they changed everything that came afterward. Not demanding. Not accusing. Just a simple question that carried more weight than anything he'd said in years. The question led to truths that unraveled Nora's story piece by piece, the abusive partner she fled from, the shelters that had no space left, the nights spent in her car with her son, the job she fought desperately to keep because it was the only safe piece of stability they had. She had been terrified to tell him, terrified he would fire her, terrified she would lose the only income keeping them afloat. She had begun bringing her son with her only on days she had nowhere else to leave him, sneaking him into the empty staff room early in the morning before anyone arrived, praying her luck wouldn't run out. Today, her luck had simply snapped under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Adrian listened, his heart twisting with every detail. He realized how blind he had been, how easy it was for him to assume that the people around him lived simple, comfortable lives, untouched by hardship. But this woman had been fighting battles he couldn't begin to imagine, all while cleaning his floors and polishing his countertops with quiet dignity. Something inside him opened, something long forgotten. Empathy. Not pity, empathy. The storm outside slowly softened as though giving the moment space to breathe. The mansion felt warmer somehow, no longer just polished stone and empty rooms. Adrian took a long breath, feeling the weight of his choices tilting toward a new direction. And for the first time in years, he allowed his heart to guide him rather than his logic. He offered help, gentle, respectful, and without conditions. A place for them to stay in the guest suite. A chance to rebuild. Safety. Stability. He didn't want to intrude on their lives, he simply wanted them to feel human again, to feel safe, and to know that not everyone in the world turned away from suffering. The gesture broke Nora. Not in fear, this time in sheer relief. She cried silently, holding her son close, her shoulders shaking with the release of years of tension. Adrian looked away to give her privacy, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had never felt more human than he did in that moment. Over the following weeks, the mansion slowly shifted from cold luxury to a place where warmth lived again. The little boy, Jacob, began smiling. Nora regained color in her face. Adrian discovered that helping them filled a part of his soul he never knew was empty. And slowly, carefully, they built a small, unexpected family, not romantic, not forced, just deeply human. If this story touched you even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps stories like this reach more hearts and spread hope. Before the ending, please leave a comment. Would you have helped Nora if you were in Adrian's place?